Spirit. Animal. Black. Bear. Alexis. Ahanian. Is perhaps best known for being a co-founder of Reddit and Hitmonk. He was in the very first class of Y Combinator, arguably the world's most selective startup accelerator, where he is now a partner. He is an investor or advisor in more than 100 startups. An activist for digital rights, example. SOPA/PIPA, and the best-selling author of Without Their Permission. You are a rounding error. I had an executive at Yahoo who brought me and Steve in for a potential acquisition discussion. This was early in Reddit and told us we were a rounding error because our traffic was so small. I put, "You are a rounding error," on our wall in the Reddit office. After that meeting as a wall of negative reinforcement for me. That ended up being kind of valuable for me and helpful, and I still am grateful to this day that he was such a dick, because it was so motivating. But I don't want to be that guy. See Amanda Palmer's quote, "Take the pain and wear it like a shirt on." Page 521. TF, Reddit is now a global top 50 website. You have to give a lot of damns. Our site made users laugh. Sometimes because we had jokes in the error messages. That kind of thing. I ask people, give me an example of something that you've built into your product or your service that you're especially proud of. That's one of these touch points for someone to just go, wow, if you can inject this life into your software, into the copy, into the whatever, you can connect with people. I mean, people still fucking tweet about our error message on Hitmonk, and it's an error message. Why are they doing that? Because it gave them a moment of levity while they were doing something that they expected to be pretty boring. Like searching for a flight. Founders have to realize the bar is set so low because most companies stopped giving a fuck so long ago. It's something that I really expect other founders to do, and it ends up being pretty easy compared to building out the actual site or architecting the back end. This doesn't require a few years of programming expertise. It just requires you to give lots of damns, which not enough people do. A damn giving assignment of less than 15 minutes improve a notification email from your business, example subscription confirmation, order confirmation, whatever. Invest that little bit of time to make it a little bit more human, or depending on your brand, a little funnier, a little more different, or a little more whatever. It'll be worth it, and that's my challenge. See Derek Sivers' best email ever on page 192. One of his questions for founders who apply to Y Combinator: what are you doing that the world doesn't realize is a really big fucking deal? Giving feedback to founders. How do you express skepticism? Alexis has many approaches, of course. But I like this example of what Cal Fuzzman, page 495, might call letting the silence do the work. I really think a lot can be conveyed with a raised eyebrow. Organizations. Alexis introduced me to Electronic Frontier Foundation. EFF.org is the leading nonprofit organization defending civil liberties in the digital world. Fight for the Future. Fightforthefuture.org is dedicated to protecting and expanding the Internet's transformative power in our lives by creating civic campaigns that are engaging for millions of people. Productivity tricks for the neurotic, manic depressive, and crazy like me. This chapter was one of the harder for me to write. I drafted a portion, then I'd let it sit for months. Feeling guilty, I'd spend a few more hours on it, then repeat my procrastination. As a result, the lessons are spread out over a few years. Eventually, it was the below quote that helped me finish this piece, which I hope will be as helpful to you as it is embarrassing for me. The moment that you feel that, just possibly, you're walking down the street naked, exposing too much of your heart and your mind and what exists on the inside, showing too much of yourself. That's the moment you may be starting to get it right. Neil Gaiman, University of the Arts commencement speech. So, here goes, and I hope it aids at least a few of you. Reality check. Not long ago, I had a birthday party. A dozen friends and I gathered for several days of wonderful sun, beach, and catching up. On the last day, I didn't get up until 11:30 a.m., knowing full well that the last remaining friends were leaving at 12 noon. I was afraid of being alone. Like a child, I hid my head under the covers, literally, and hit snooze until reality couldn't be postponed any further. But why am I telling you this? The dangerous myths of successful people. We all like to appear successful, a nebulous term at best, and the media like to portray standouts as superheroes. Sometimes, these dramatic stories of overcoming the odds are inspiring. More often, they lead to an unhealthy knee-jerk conclusion. Well, maybe the entrepreneur/artist/creator painted as superhero can do it, but I'm just a normal guy/girl. This chapter is intended to give you a behind-the-scenes look at my own life. Though I've occasionally done profiles like a day in the life with Morgan Spurlock's crew, I rarely let journalists follow me for a normal day. Why? Because I'm no superhero. I'm not even a consistent normal. In 2013, I hit a rough patch of 3 months, during which I cried while watching Rudy repeatedly hit snooze for 1 to 3 hours past my planned wake time, because I simply didn't want to face the day. Considered giving everything away and moving to Montreal, Seville, or Iceland. Location varies based on what I imagine escaping. Saw a therapist for the first time, as I was convinced that I was doomed to lifelong pessimism. Used gentlemanly, ahem, websites to relax during the day when I clearly had urgent and important shit to do. Took my daily caffeine intake, read, self-medication, so high that my resting pulse was 120 plus beats per minute. 8 to 10 cups of coffee per day at minimum. Wore the same pair of jeans for a week straight just to have a much needed constant during weeks of chaos. Seems pretty dysfunctional, right? But, in the last 8 weeks of that same period, I also increased my passive income 20% plus. Bought my dream house. Meditated twice per day. For 20 minutes per session, without fail. That marked the first time I'd been able to meditate consistently. Ended up cutting my caffeine intake to next to nothing in the last 4 weeks, usually tea in the morning and green tea in the afternoon. With the help of my blog readers, raised $100,000 plus for charity. Water for my birthday. Raised $250,000 in 53 minutes for a startup called SHYP. Signed one of the most exciting business deals of my last 10 years. My TV show, The Tim Ferriss Experiment, added roughly 20 pounds of muscle after learning the pain and joy of high rep front squats, and topical DHEA, courtesy of Patrick Arnold. Page 35. Transformed my blood work. Realized once again that manic depressive symptoms are just part of entrepreneurship. Came to feel closer to all my immediate family members. The point. Most superheroes are nothing of the sort. They're weird, neurotic creatures who do big things despite lots of self-defeating habits and self-talk. Personally, I suck at efficiency, doing things quickly. To compensate and cope, here's my 8-step process for maximizing efficacy, doing the right things. 1. Wake up at least 1 hour before you have to be at a computer screen. Email is the mind killer. 2. Make a cup of tea, like and sit down with a pen/pencil and paper. 3. Write down the 3 to 5 things and no more that are making you the most anxious or uncomfortable. They're often things that have been punted from one day's to-do list to the next, to the next, to the next, and so on. Most important usually equals most uncomfortable, with some chance of rejection or conflict. 4. For each item, ask yourself, if this were the only thing I accomplished today, would I be satisfied with my day? Will moving this forward make all the other to-dos unimportant or easier to knock off later? Put another way, what, if done, will make all of the rest easier or irrelevant? 5. Look only at the items you've answered yes to for at least one of these questions. 6. Block out at 2 to 3 hours to focus on one of them for today. Let the rest of the urgent but less important stuff slide. It will still be there tomorrow. 7. To be clear, block out at 2 to 3 hours to focus on one of them for today. This is one block of time. Cobbling together 10 minutes here and there to add up to 120 minutes does not work. No phone calls or social media allowed. 8. If you get distracted or start procrastinating, don't freak out and downward spiral, just gently come back to your one to do. Congratulations. That's it. This is the only way I can create big outcomes despite my never-ending impulse to procrastinate, nap, and otherwise fritter away days with bullshit. If I have 10 important things to do in a day, it's 100% certain nothing important will get done that day. On the other hand, I can usually handle one must-do item and block out my lesser behaviors for 2 to 3 hours a day. It doesn't take much to seem superhuman and appear successful to nearly everyone around you. In fact, you just need one rule: what you do is more important than how you do everything else, and doing something well does not make it important. If you consistently feel the counterproductive need for volume and doing lots of stuff, put these on a post-it note. Being busy is a form of laziness, lazy thinking and indiscriminate action. Being busy is most often used as a guise for avoiding the few critically important but uncomfortable actions. And when, despite your best efforts, you feel like you're losing at the game of life, remember, even the best of the best sometimes feel this way. When I'm in the pit of despair, I recall what iconic writer Kurt Vonnegut said about his process: when I write, I feel like an armless, legless man with a crayon in his mouth. Don't overestimate the world and underestimate yourself. You are better than you think. And you are not alone. Asterisk any guy who claims he's never done this shouldn't be trusted. When you can write well, you can think well. Everyone is interesting. If you're ever bored in a conversation, the problem's with you, not the other person. Spirit animal. Mantis. Shrimp. Matt Mullenweg. Matt Mullenweg, TW/IG. At photomat, MA.TT, has been named one of Businessweek's 25 most influential people on the web, but I think that's an understatement. He is best known as the original lead developer of WordPress, which now powers more than 25% of the entire web. If you visited sites like Wall Street Journal, Forbes, TED, NFL, or Reuters, or my lil website, you've seen WordPress in action. Matt is also the CEO of Automatic, which is valued at more than $1 billion and has a fully distributed team of 500 employees around the world. I'm honored to be an advisor. When he appeared on my podcast, I attempted to get him drunk on sipping tequila, Casa Dragones Blanco. He also likes Don Julio 1942, and make him curse, both of which are hard. Behind the scenes, Matt truly doesn't curse. I once heard him say, "I kid you not, that's really bad," but, to which I responded, "What? You're trying to get around badass? No. You're not allowed to do that." We're both big fans of Peter Drucker and his book The Effective Executive, as well as Alain de Botton's page 486, How Proust Can Change Your Life. Matt wrote the majority of the code for WordPress over a year of polyphasic sleep, roughly 4 hours of waking, followed by 20 to 30 minutes of sleep, repeated indefinitely. This is nicknamed the Huberman Protocol. Why did he stop? I got a girlfriend. We have traveled to many countries together. He takes all the photos, and I try and learn the language to translate. On one flight to Greece in 2008, I was all wound up. About people pirating the 4-hour work week. Online. He asked me. Why are you upset? Which threw me off. Wasn't it obvious? He followed up with the people who download your book as a bad PDF aren't your customers. They would never buy it in the first place. Look at it as free advertising. And with a 30-second intervention, he eliminated my worrying about it. Matt is one of the people I most try to emulate. He is exceptionally calm and logical under pressure. I've seen him face multiple data center collapses with near indifference, calmly sipping beer before another billiards shot. What should I tell a hugely influential journalist asking about it? Tell him we're on it. Then he sunk another ball. He's the epitome of getting upset won't help things. I frequently ask myself, what would Matt do, or what would Matt say to me? Don't be a dog, think. What if? From the early days of WordPress, we would always think, okay, if we do X today, what does that result in tomorrow? A year from now, 10 years from now. The metaphor I think of the most, because it's simple, is the dog chasing the car. What does the dog do if he catches the car? He doesn't have a plan for it. So I find it just as often on the entrepreneurial side. People don't plan for success. On losing a $400,000 check, Matt constantly misplaces things. I have a meeting and I spend 10 minutes looking for my wallet because I just stuck it someplace. It's in the fridge. Or something. I don't know. I'm always losing something. Actually, I lost one of our initial investment checks. It was a check for $400,000. Tim, that's not good to lose. Matt, it was investor Phil Black, who's still on the board today, and he wrote a paper check, like the kind you would use at the grocery store or for normal things. The most money I'd ever seen in my life. I was 20 years old. I was like, what is this? I expected it to be a check like a publisher's clearing house, you know? Like the size of a table. Tim, right, that you could surf like a floating carpet from Aladdin down to the bank. Matt, luckily, the other investors wired their money because I misplaced this check. And I was thinking, oh, my goodness, what do I do in this situation? Because obviously, he could stop the check, but then he's just entrusted me with $400,000 and I've lost it. Do I tell him? Do I not tell him? Is he going to notice at some point? And months passed. Literally months passed. He doesn't say anything, I don't say anything. Tim, because you didn't want to ask him. Matt, I didn't ask him. And I'm going back to Houston for Thanksgiving. And I opened the book I'm reading and I had used it as a bookmark. And it kind of fell out of the book on the plane. I was like, oh, my goodness. The tail end. On a hike in San Francisco, Matt recommended I read The Tail End by Tim Urban on the Wait But Why blog. If you only read one article this month, make it that one. It uses diagrams to underscore how short life really is. Here's just one gem. It turns out that when I graduated from high school, I had already used up 93% of my in-person parent time. I'm now enjoying the last 5% of that time. We're in the tail end. Might be time for you, and me, to rethink our personal priorities. On a related and sad note, Matt's father passed away unexpectedly weeks after he recommended this article to me. Matt was at his bedside. QWERTY is for junior varsity. The normal QWERTY keyboard layout was designed to slow down human operators to avoid jams. That time has passed, so try the Dvorak layout instead, which is easier on your tendons and helps prevent carpal tunnel syndrome. Read the Dvorak zine, dvzine.org. Colmac is even more efficient, if you dare. Within Automatic, Matt has held speed typing challenges, where the loser has to switch to the winner's layout. So far, Dvorak has always beaten QWERTY on getting the ma.tt domain name. I had to wire money several grand to Trinidad and Tobago I was in the Bank of America, and they said, "Sir, are you sure about this?" I was like, yeah, it's fine. I read it on the internet. Tools of the trade. Here are some of Matt's go-to tech enablers. P2, WordPress theme, for replacing email p2theme.com. Slack for replacing imslack.com. Momentum, Chrome extension to help you focus. Wunderlist, to-do management app/tool to help you get stuff done. Telegram, a messaging app with really good encryption. Calm.com for meditation. How Matt got in shape. He committed to one push-up before bed. Yes, just one push-up. No matter how late you're running. No matter what's going on in the world. You can't argue against doing one push-up. Come on. There's no excuse. I often find I just need to get over that initial hump with something that's almost embarrassingly small as a goal, and then that can become a habit. TF, remember Chade Mengtan's One Breath on page 155? Same idea. Fully text, fully distributed. Automatic has more than 500 employees and is fully distributed across more than 50 countries. They have almost no in-person or phone meetings. There is no headquarters, so to speak. They skip the offices, hire the best talent worldwide, and spend the savings on $250 per month co-working stipends and other benefits. The interview process is as much like the actual work as possible. It's all email or text chat, because that's how we primarily communicate. It also prevents you from any subconscious bias. Tim, what do you look for or disqualify against? Matt, I look for a passion, attention to detail, drive beyond the things that they need to do. I'm totally down with quirky. Tim, what questions do you ask to get an indication of those things? Matt, so at this point in the early stages all I'm doing is looking at emails. So literally there's no chat, no anything. It's purely based on the care and effort that they put into this email. We've tried forms and things they fill out before, and we've gone back to just a free form email because I want to see what kind of attachment they use. I want to see who their email client is. I want to see if you can tell they've copied and pasted things because of different text and different font sizes. All of those are indicators, and not any one of them alone. You know something I can say? You asked about what we look for in candidates. Clarity of writing. I think clarity of writing indicates clarity of thinking. TF, I highly recommend reading the CEO of Automatic on holding auditions to build a strong team. From the April 2014 issue of the Harvard Business Review, find it on hbr.org. Words that work. Matt pays incredible attention to word choice and ordering, diction and syntax. He loves studying poets coders who have elegant, poetic style, but he does the same with spoken language. He recommended I read the book Words That Work, written by Republican political strategist Frank Luntz. It's brilliant. Matt added, if someone likes that book, then I might point them to George Lakoff. He has a great seminal work from the 1980s called Women, Fire, and Dangerous Things. He loves books about framing and language. Advice to your 20-year-old self? Slow down. I think a lot of the mistakes of my youth were mistakes of ambition, not mistakes of sloth. So just slowing down, whether that's meditating, whether that's taking time for yourself away from screens, whether that's really focusing in on who you're talking to or who you're with. 104 Chicken McNuggets. The Super Bowl was in Houston, Texas. In 2004. I lived like a mile from Reliance Stadium. For the Super Bowl, McDonald's did a special where you could get 20 McNuggets for around $4. And I was super broke at the time. So I thought, man, I'm just gonna stock up on these, the way you might get ramen or cans of Camels, which I would do when they went on sale. I'd always buy a bunch of them. So I just got a bunch of McNuggets, and then I love McNuggets. I had to sweet talk the person, so they gave me lots of extra sweet and sour sauce. Tim, oh my god. Matt, and the McDonald's sweet and sour sauce is not like sweet and sour sauce anywhere else in the world. All sweet and sour sauce is red, and for some reason theirs is brown. I don't know why. You might. Tim, it's been genetically engineered to be as addictive as possible? I don't know. Matt, it's so good. So I just start popping them, and next thing I knew it was 104. Tim, it wasn't even a bet or anything. You just rampaged through 104. Matt, while watching the Super Bowl. Nicholas McCarthy. Nicholas McCarthy, TW. At McCarthy Piano. nicholasmccarthy.co.uk, was born in 1989 without his right hand, and started to play the piano at the age of 14. He was told he would never succeed as a concert pianist. The doubters were wrong. His graduation from the prestigious Royal College of Music in London in 2012 appeared in press around the world, as he became the only one-handed pianist to graduate from the Royal College of Music in its 130-year history. Nicholas has now performed extensively throughout the world, including playing alongside Coldplay and G.I. Ving a rendition of the Paralympic anthem in front of an in-person audience of 86,000 people and 500 million worldwide TV viewers. His first album, entitled Solo, features 17 pieces of left-hand repertoire, spanning 3 centuries, and has been released around the world to great acclaim. Franz Liszt. I'm embarrassed to admit that I'd never heard of Liszt before my conversation with Nicholas. Now, he's part of my regular listening. Search YouTube for Best of Liszt, Haladin Music. Franz Liszt is one of the great romantic composers of piano literature. He was really held as the super virtuoso of the 19th century. Lesser-known musicians to explore: the concert of the Argentinian pianist Martha Argerich. She is just superhuman. She is quite elderly now, but she still plays. She's coming to the BBC proms this year. She has cult status in our world. TF, I now routinely listen to her. 2. Have your mind explode? Search Tchaikovsky Piano Concerto No. 1. Full Argerich Charles Dutoit and check out minute 31. Playing the long game. Nicholas explains why he decided to specialize in left-hand repertoire, instead of also using his right little hand, a very short extension of his forearm from the elbow. It was what my teacher at the time said: you don't want to become a gimmick. Especially with all the TV talent shows, which were just coming about then. It was at the start of Britain's Got Talent. I'm so relieved I took her at BCE, because I would have been that gimmick who maybe made a quick buck over 2 years, but I certainly wouldn't have the respect that I have now as a pianist, and I certainly wouldn't have had the career that I've had to date and that I look forward to continuing until I'm in my 60s. Nicholas's best $100 or less purchase: Neil's Yard Aromatherapy Diffuser, which he uses every day when at home. I find geranium relaxes me, but at the same time keeps me perked up enough to be able to work. TF, I started using geranium oil shortly after our podcast, when working on early brainstorming and drafting for this book. Lacking a diffuser, I started by dabbing a bit on my wrists and then rubbing it on my neck near my ears. Placebo or not, I felt noticeably more stamina. I later purchased an Inno Gear 200 ml aromatherapy diffuser in wood grain. Most diffusers look cheap otherwise, for home use. Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins, TW/FB/IG. At Tony Robbins. TonyRobbins.com, is the world's most famous performance coach. He's advised everyone from Bill Clinton and Serena Williams to Leonardo DiCaprio and Oprah, who calls him superhuman. Tony Robbins has consulted or advised international leaders, including Nelson Mandela, Mikhail Gorbachev, Margaret Thatcher, François Mitterrand, Princess Diana, Mother Teresa, and 3 U.S. presidents. Robbins has also developed and produced 5 award-winning television infomercials that have continuously aired on age every 30 minutes, 24 hours a day, somewhere in North America, since 1989. Backstory: I first read Tony Robbins's Unlimited Power in high school, when it was Recommended by a straight A student. Then, just out of college, I listened to a used cassette set of Personal Power 2. During my commute in my mom's hand-me-down minivan. It catalyzed my first real business, which led to many of the adventures and misadventures in the 4-hour work week. People say, don't meet your heroes because it nearly always ends in disappointment. With Tony, however, it's been the opposite. The more I get to know him, the more he impresses me. Little known fact, the first Instagram pic I ever posted, at Tim Ferriss, was of Tony literally palming my entire face. His hands are like catcher's mitts. I didn't survive, I prepared. Nelson Mandela's answer when Tony asked him, "Sir, how did you survive all those years in prison?" Is there a quote that guides your life? It's a belief: life is always happening for us, not to us. It's our job to find out where the benefit is. If we do, life is magnificent. Short and sweet. Stressed is the achiever word for fear. Losers react, leaders anticipate. Mastery doesn't come from an infographic. What you know doesn't mean shit. What do you do consistently? The best investment he's ever made? $35 for a 3-hour Jim Rohn seminar. Attended at age 17. He agonized over the $35 decision, as he was making $40 a week as a janitor, but Jim gave Tony's life direction. Decades later, when Tony asked Warren Buffett what his all-time best investment was, the answer was a Dale Carnegie public speaking course, taken at age 20. Prior to that, Buffett would vomit before public speaking. After the course, and this is the critical piece, Buffett immediately went to the University of Omaha and asked to teach, as he didn't want to lapse back into his old behaviors. As Tony recounted, Buffett told him, investing in yourself is the most important investment you'll ever make in your life. There's no financial investment that'll ever match it. Because if you develop more skill, more ability, more insight, more capacity, that's what's going to really provide economic freedom. It's those skill sets that really make that happen. This echoes what Jim Rohn famously said: if you let your learning lead to knowledge, you become a fool. If you let your learning lead to action, you become wealthy. Quality questions create a quality life. Tony sometimes phrases this as, the quality of your life is the quality of your questions. Questions determine your focus. Most people, and I'm certainly guilty of this at times, spend their lives focusing on negativity. Example: how could he say that to me, and therefore the wrong priorities. A focus on me equals suffering. This brain inside our heads is a 2-million-year-old brain. It's ancient, old survival software that is running you a good deal of time. Whenever you're suffering, that survival software is there. The reason you're suffering is you're focused on yourself. People tell me, I'm not suffering that way. I'm worrying about my kids. My kids are not what they need to be. No, the reason these people are upset is they feel they failed their kids. It's still about them. Suffering comes from 3 thought patterns: loss, less, never. The bolded portion above, combined with another friend's advice, changed my life. It took a while for me to connect the dots. I don't think I'm a complete narcissist, too bald and pale for that, but I still wondered how to put this into a concrete daily practice. Then I learned the dead simple loving kindness meditation exercise from my friend Chade Mengtan, page 157, which had a profound effect after just 3 to 4 days. Try it. State rightward arrow, story rightward arrow. Strategy. I learned this from my first Tony Robbins event, Unleash the Power Within, UPW, which Tony invited me to after our first podcast. Perhaps more than any other lesson from Tony, I've thought about this the most in the last year. If you were to look at my daily journal right now, you'd see that I've scribbled state rightward arrow, story rightward arrow, strategy at the top of each page for the next several weeks. It's a reminder to check the boxes in that order. Tony believes that, in a lowered emotional state, we only see the problems, not solutions. Let's say you wake up feeling tired and overwhelmed. You sit down to brainstorm strategies to solve your issues, but it comes to oh not. And you feel even worse afterward. This is because you started in a negative state, then attempted strategy but didn't succeed, due to tunnel vision on the problems, and then likely told yourself self-defeating stories. Example, I always do this. Why am I so wound up I can't even think straight? To fix this, he encourages you to prime your state. First, the biochemistry will help you proactively tell yourself an enabling story. Only then do you think on strategy, as you'll see the options instead of dead ends. Priming my state is often as simple as doing 5 to 10 push-ups or getting 20 minutes of sun exposure. See Rick Rubin, page 502. Even though I do my most intense exercise at night, I've started doing 1 to 2 minutes of calisthenics or kettlebell swings. See Justin Borda, page 356, in the morning to set my state for the day. Tony's own priming process is included below. I now often ask myself, is this really a problem I need to think my way out of? Or is it possible I just need to fix my biochemistry? I've wasted a lot of time journaling on problems when I just needed to eat breakfast sooner, do 10 push-ups, or get an extra hour of sleep. Sometimes, you think you have to figure out your life's purpose, but you really just need some macadamia nuts and a cold fucking shower. Morning priming instead of meditation. Upon waking, Tony immediately goes into his priming routine, which is intended to produce a rapid change in his physiology. To me, if you want a primetime life, you've got to prime daily. There are many tools that I've seen Tony use over the years, several of which I've adopted for myself, including cold water plunge. I use a quick cold shower, which could be just 30 to 60 seconds. Tony follows this with breathing exercises. He does 3 sets of 30 reps. His seated technique is similar to the rapid nasal breath of fire in yoga, but he adds in rapid overhead extension of the arms on the inhale, with the elbows dropping down the rib cage on the exhale. Alternative breath walking. This is vintage Tony, but I still use it quite often when traveling. Simply walk for a few minutes, using a breathing cycle of 4 short inhales through the nose, then 4 short exhales through the mouth. Following something like the above, Tony does 9 to 10 minutes of what some might consider meditation. To him, however, the objective is very different. It's about cueing and prompting enabling emotions for the rest of the day. His 9 to 10 minutes are broken into thirds. Here is an abbreviated synopsis. The first 3 minutes, feeling totally grateful for 3 things. I make sure that one of them is very, very simple, the wind on my face, the reflection of the clouds that I just saw. But I don't just think gratitude. I let gratitude fill my soul, because when you're grateful, we all know there's no anger. It's impossible to be angry and grateful simultaneously. When you're grateful, there is no fear. You can't be fearful and grateful simultaneously. The second 3 minutes, total focus on feeling the presence of God, if you will. However you want to language that for yourself. But this inner presence coming in, and feeling it heal everything in my body, in my mind, my emotions, my relationships, my finances. I see it as solving anything that needs to be solved. I experience the strengthening of my gratitude, of my conviction, of my passion. The last 3 minutes, focusing on 3 things that I'm going to make happen, my 3 to thrive. See it as though it's already been done, feel the emotions, etc. And, as I've always said, there's no excuse not to do 10 minutes. If you don't have 10 minutes, you don't have a life. This reminded me of something I've heard from many adept meditators, such as Russell Simmons, in various forms. If you don't have 20 minutes to delve into yourself through meditation, then that means you really need 2 hours. 4 commonalities across the best investors. Tony has interviewed and developed friendships with some of the best investors in the world, including Paul Tudor Jones, who he's coached for More than 10 years, Ray Dalio, Carl Icahn, David Swenson, Kyle Bass, and many more. These are the hard to interview unicorns who consistently beat the market, despite the fact that it's called impossible. Tony wrote a book based on his learnings, Money, Master the Game, and here are few of the patterns he identified. 1. Capping the downside. Every single one of those people is obsessed with not losing money. I mean, a level of obsession that's mind-boggling. On Richard Branson, his first question to every business is, what's the downside? And how do I protect against it? Like when he did his piece with Virgin Air Travel. That's a big risk to start an airline. He went to Boeing and negotiated a deal that he could send the planes back if it didn't work, and he wasn't liable. TF, Branson also tested with little or no risk in losing my virginity, which had a huge impact on me around college graduation. He described his very first flight. We were trying to catch a flight to Puerto Rico, but the local Puerto Rican scheduled flight was cancelled. The airport terminal was full of stranded passengers. I made a few calls to charter companies, and agreed to charter a plane for $2,000 to Puerto Rico. I divided the price by the number of seats, borrowed a blackboard, and wrote Virgin Airways, $39 single flight to Puerto Rico. I walked around the airport terminal and soon filled every seat on the charter plane. As we landed in Puerto Rico, a passenger turned to me and said, Virgin Airways isn't too bad, smarten up the service a little, and you could be in business. Back to Tony, cap the downside also applies to thinking long-term about fees and middlemen. If 3 of my friends and I all put aside the same amount of money, and we all get a 7% return, but my buddy's getting fees of 3%, my other buddy's 2%, and I'm 1%, and all 3 of us put $1 million in, or $100,000, the person with 3% of fees ends up with 65% less money in the long term. 2. Asymmetrical risks and rewards. Every single one of them is obsessed with asymmetrical risk and reward. It simply means they're looking to use the least amount of risk to get the max amount of upside, and that's what they live for. They don't believe they have to take huge risks for huge rewards. Say, how do I get no risk and get huge rewards? And because you ask a question continuously and you believe there's an answer, you get it. TF, here's a wild example. Kyle Bass at one point bought $1 million worth of nickels, roughly 20 million coins. Why? Because their face value was 5 cents and their scrap metal value was 6.8 cents at the time. That's an immediate gain of $360,000. Nicely done. 3. Asset allocation. They absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt, know they're going to be wrong, so they set up an asset allocation system that will make them successful. They all agree asset allocation is the single most important investment decision in money. Master the game. Ray Dalio elaborated for Tony, when people think they've got a balanced portfolio, stocks are 3 times more volatile than bonds. So when you're 50/50ths, you're really 90/10ths. You really are massively at risk, and that's why when the markets go down, you get eaten alive. Whatever asset class you invest in, I promise you, in your lifetime, it will drop no less than 50% and more likely 70% at some point. That is why you absolutely must diversify. 4. Contribution. And the last one that I found, almost all of them were real givers, not just givers on the surface but really passionate about giving. It was really real. TF, one great example is the Robin Hood Foundation, conceived of by Paul Tudor Jones, which fights poverty in New York City. Who comes to mind when I say the word punchable? For a few dozen podcast episodes, I ask the question, when you think of the word punchable, whose face is the first that comes to mind? 9 times out of 10, it fell flat. And I've since stopped asking it? But in my interview with Tony, all of those flops were redeemed. He took a long pause and then said, punchable. Oh, my gosh. Well, I had an interesting meeting with President Obama and proceeded to describe a closed session conversation with President Obama. You can hear the full story at 42:15 in episode number 38. It was one of those God, I really hope my audio equipment is working moments. He closed it with so, I don't know if I'd say punch, but shake him. Most gifted or recommended books. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. The Fourth Turning by William Strauss. Also, Generations by William Strauss, which was gifted to Tony by Bill Clinton. Mindset by Carol Dweck, For Parenting, As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, C. Shea Carl, page 441, Spirit. Animal. Sled Dog. Casey Neistat. Casey Neistat, TW/IG. At Casey Neistat. YouTube.com/Casey Neistat, is a New York-based filmmaker and YouTuber. Casey ran away from home at 15 and had his first child at 17. He went on welfare to get free milk and diapers and never asked his parents for money again. His online films have been viewed nearly 300 million times in the last 5 years. He is the writer, director, editor, and star of the series The Neistat Brothers on HBO and won the John Cassavetes Award at the 2011 Independent Spirit Awards for the film Daddy Long Legs. His main body of work consists of dozens of short films he has released exclusively on the internet, including regular contributions to the critically acclaimed New York Times Op-Doc series. He is also the founder of BIM, a startup aiming to make creating and sharing video dead simple. All you need to know is from World War II. I always say I got all my understanding of how business and life works from studying the Second World War. Aside from the autobiography of Malcolm X, Casey's favorite book is The Second World War by John Keegan. He's read this massive tome 3 times, cover to cover. He remembers showing up to work and getting in trouble because he was tired from staying up all night reading this textbook. The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp is Casey's favorite movie, made during World War II. Wes Anderson studied this film, and you can see a lot of his adapted style in this movie. Favorite documentary. Little Dieter Needs to Fly by Werner Herzog is Casey's favorite documentary. Made in 1997. This is about a U.S. fighter pilot in Vietnam who gets shot down in his very first mission, and is trapped as a POW for a number of years. This documentary will bring you to your knees anytime you are having a bad day, or you think you have it hard. Watch this movie and you will understand what it means to survive. See Jocko Willink, page 412. Follow what angers you. Casey made the short film Bike Lanes in 2011, and it became his first viral hit. He was given a summons from a New York City police officer for riding his bike outside of the bike lane, which isn't an actual infraction. Instead of going to court, fighting the $50 summons, and wasting half a day in the process, Casey redirected his anger and made a movie that expressed his frustration in a clever way. Casey begins the movie by repeating what the cop told him: he has to stay in the bike lane for safety and legal reasons, no matter what. Casey proceeds to ride his bike around NYC, crashing into everything that is in the bike lanes, preventing people from following this rule. The film's grand finale is Casey crashing into a police car that was truly parked in the middle of a bike lane. His movie went tremendously viral and was seen around 5 million times in its first day. At one point, Mayor Bloomberg had to respond to a question about the video in a press conference. When in doubt about your next creative project, follow your anger. See Whitney Cummings, page 477, and James Altucher, page 246. What's the most outrageous thing you can do? Make it count. At close to 20 million views, is Casey's all-time most popular video on YouTube. The catalyst: he'd built a successful career in advertising by 2011 but was extremely bored. He was in the middle of a 3 commercial deal with Nike. The first 2 movies were right down the line, what you'd Expect. I had big, huge, $100-million athletes in them. They were very well received. I loved making them. But when it came time to make the third movie, I was really burnt out from the process. At the 9th hour, I called my editor up and said, "Hey, let's not make this advertisement. Instead, let's do something I've always wanted to do, which is, let's just take the entire production budget and travel the world until we run out of money. And we'll record that. We'll make some sort of movie about that." And he said, "You're crazy, but sure." The Make It Count video literally opens with scrolling text that says, Nike asked me to make a movie about what it means to make it count. Instead of making their movie, I spent the entire budget traveling around the world with my friend Max. We'd keep going until the money ran out. It took 10 days. They covered 15 countries. Make It Count became a video about chasing what matters to you. This was the entire message and point of the campaign to begin with. Make It Count ended up being Nike's most watched video on the internet for several years. TF, how can you make your bucket list dreams pay for themselves by sharing them? This is, in effect, how I've crafted my entire career since 2004. It's modeled after Ben Franklin's excellent advice: if you would not be forgotten as soon as you are dead and rotten, either write things worth reading, or do things worth writing. The YouTube inflection point. Casey's subscriber count and success on YouTube hockey sticked when he decided on his 34th birthday to vlog. Video blog, daily. Shay Carl, page 441. Had the same experience. Philosophy and daily routine. You realize that you will never be the best looking person in the room. You'll never be the smartest person in the room. You'll never be the most educated, the most well versed. You can never compete on those levels. But what you can always compete on, the true egalitarian aspect to success, is hard work. You can always work harder than the next guy. Casey walks the talk. He wakes up at 4:30 a.m., 7 days a week, and he immediately finishes his vlog edit from the night before. The edit usually gets done between 6:30 a.m. and 7 a.m. 7 a.m. to 7:45 a.m. is for processing, uploading, and designing the video. The video goes live at exactly 8 a.m., 7 days a week. Casey works out immediately after 8 a.m., which usually involves running 8 to 12 miles, or the gym. He likes listening to the Johnny Famous playlist on Spotify. He goes into the office by 9:30 a.m. After his workout, he works in his office all day, and tries to get out by 6:30 p.m. to race home and give his baby a bath. He will then hang out with his wife for about an hour until she goes to bed. Around 9 p.m. After his wife goes to bed, he sits down and edits until he passes out at his computer, usually around 1 a.m. Casey usually sleeps on the couch until 4:30 a.m., and then he starts the process all over again. Who do you think of when you hear the word successful? My grandmother. She passed away at 92. She's my hero, she's my muse, she's my everything. She started tap dancing when she was 6 years old. She was a little fat girl and her parents made her do something to lose the weight, so she started tap dancing, and she loved it. She fell in love with something at age 6 and she didn't stop tap dancing until the day before she died at age 92. She died on a Monday morning, and the first thing we had to do was call her 100 students to say she wasn't going to make class that day. What is the ultimate quantification of success? For me, it's not how much time you spend doing what you love. It's how little time you spend doing what you hate. And this woman spent all day, every day doing what she loved. Spirit. Animal. Rhino. Morgan Spurlock. Morgan Spurlock, TW. At Morgan Spurlock. Morganspurlock.com, is an Oscar-nominated documentary filmmaker based in New York. He is a prolific writer, director, producer, and human guinea pig. His first film, Super Size Me, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2004, winning Best Directing honors. The film went on to garner an Academy Award nomination for Best Feature Documentary. Since then, Morgan has directed, produced, and or distributed the critically acclaimed CNN series Morgan Spurlock, Inside Man, the FX series 30 Days, and the films Where in the World is Osama Bin Laden, Freakonomics, the Greatest Movie Ever Sold, and many others. Morgan's latest project is a tech startup called select.com, which is a community and one-stop marketplace where people can browse, sell, and buy collectibles of any type imaginable: Star Wars, Smurfs, comics, a Millennium Falcon made from motorcycle parts, etc. Once you get fancy, fancy gets broken. TF, this was related to gear, but it can be extended to much more. How Super Size Me came to be. I was sitting on my mom's couch in a spectacular tryptophan haze, when a news story came on about these two girls who were suing McDonald's. These girls said, "We're fat, we're sick, and it's your fault." I thought, come on. That's crazy. You're going to sue somebody for selling you food that you bought, that you ate, and then blame them for it? How can you do that? Then a spokesperson for McDonald's came on and said, "You can't link our food to these girls being sick. You can't link our food to these girls being obese. Our food is healthy. It's nutritious. It's good for you." I thought, I don't know if you can say that either. If it's that good for me, then shouldn't I be able to eat it for 30 days straight with no side effects? And I was like, that's it? TF, is there a common saying, or some public pronouncement, that you can disprove by making art about it? By doing a test? What makes you angry? See Casey Neistat, page 217, and Whitney Cummings, page 477. On cheering for yourself first. Turi is a great writer-commentator. He told me a story about going to Kanye West's house once, and inside Kanye's house, there's a big, giant poster of Kanye right inside the living room. Turi asked, "Kanye, why do you have a giant picture of you on the wall?" And Kanye goes, "Well, I got to cheer for me before anyone else can cheer for me." I thought, there is some fantastic logic. That's a good response. Story trumps cinematography. Advice to aspiring filmmakers: you can sacrifice quality for a great story. I'll watch shaky camera footage now so long as it's a great story and I'm engaged. Watching him light is like watching a monkey fuck a football. James Cameron. This is one of Morgan's favorite one-liners attributed to James Cameron, from a New Yorker profile of Cameron, man of extremes. I actually met Jim briefly through Peter Diamandis, page 369, as we went on a zero-G flight, zero gravity, parabolic flight, together. As part of the experience, which was a fundraiser for the Surprise, we all got crew shirts from the first Avatar production. The shirts have just 3 lines on them in huge font: hope is not a strategy. Luck is not a factor. Fear is not an option. I still wear the t-shirt for motivation during big projects, as I did for the final deadline sprint for the 4-hour body. Don't be afraid to show your scars. A friend of mine, a few years ago, gave me some good advice. He said, you can't be afraid to show your scars. That's who you are, and he said you have to continue to stay true to that. I think that was some of the best advice I ever got. Most gifted or recommended book: The Living Gita, The Complete Bhagavad Gita, a commentary for modern readers by Sri Swami Sachidananda. Favorite documentaries: The Fog of War, Errol Morris. Many guests recommend this. It's incredible and has an unbelievable 98% average on Rotten Tomatoes. Brothers Keeper, Joe Berlinger and Bruce Sinofsky. Hoop Dreams, Steve James. Enron, Smartest Guys in the Room. And Going Clear, Scientology and The Prison of Belief, Alex Gibney. What My Morning Journal Looks Like. History is littered with examples of successful and unsuccessful people who kept daily journals, ranging from Marcus Aurelius to Ben Franklin, and from Mark Twain to George Lucas. But what on earth did they write about? Perhaps you've seen excerpts of their private journals and thought to yourself, "Goddamn, that reads like the Gettysburg Address," and become demoralized. In this chapter, I'll show you what my raw morning journal looks like and describe its function. Why? Because it's messy, and seeing the mess can be encouraging. It's easy to imagine our heroes as unflappable juggernauts, who conquer insecurity with a majestic mental karate chop every morning. This is, of course, a fantasy. Most people you see on magazine covers have plenty of mornings when they'd rather hide under the covers all day long. If you want to be wealthy as measured in money, time, relationships, ease of sleep, or otherwise spiritual, windshield wipers will help you get there with fewer accidents and less headache. Let me explain. The daily struggle. Nearly every morning, I sit down with a hot cocktail of turmeric, ginger, tea, and green tea. Next, I crack open The Artist's Way, Morning Pages. Journal by Julia Cameron. The original Artist's Way was first recommended to me by screenwriter and producer Brian Koppelman, page 613. So he's to thank for this practice in my life. But I largely skipped the original. Perhaps unfairly, as more book consumption didn't interest me. I often use reading to procrastinate. What I needed was a daily and meditative practice of production, like a tea ceremony. So, voila, I bought the journal. This companion provides plenty of context to be used by itself. To be clear, I don't journal to be productive. I don't do it to find great ideas, or to put down prose I can later publish. The pages aren't intended for anyone but me. Morning pages are, as author Julia Cameron puts it, spiritual windshield wipers. It's the most cost-effective therapy I've ever found. To quote her further, from page 8. Once we get those muddy, maddening, confusing thoughts, nebulous worries, jitters, and preoccupations on the page, we face our day with clearer Yes. Please reread the above quote. It may be the most important aspect of trapping thought on paper, i.e., writing, you'll ever encounter. Even if you consider yourself a terrible writer, writing can be viewed as a tool. There are huge benefits to writing, even if no one, yourself included, ever reads what you write. In other words, the process matters more than the product. Below is one of my real entries, which I've typed out for easier readability. Sunday, December 28th, New York. Woke up at 7:30 a.m., before everyone else. Feels great. It's a Sunday, so I feel I can take it slow, which is probably the reason it feels great. Why should Monday or Tuesday be any different? There are still people waiting regardless. Let them wait. It's funny how we work and aim and strive to get to a point where people wait for us, not the other way around. Queue get shorty. And yet, when we arrive at this vaunted point, the masses of people, often rightly, incessantly knocking on the door, one after another, causes far more stress than when you were a mere peon. SP. I was unsure of spelling. Is it because of the 100x more inbound, which decreases a feeling of self-directed free will? A feeling that you're constantly choosing from someone else's buffet instead of cooking your own food? Or is it because you feel you must be defensive and protect what you have, time, money, relationships, space, etc., for someone who's won through a lifetime of events of attacking, playing the defensive game, conflicts with the core of who they are? So, what's the point? Again, there are two ways to interpret the above journal entry, and they're not mutually exclusive. One, I'm trying to figure things out, and this might help. For instance, I've identified conflicts between goals, become successful in some respect, and related side effects 100x more inbound, which negate the benefits. I've also noted that my big wins in life have come from being aggressive, much like iconic coach Dan Gable, whose epic rants in the hard-to-find competitor supreme are worth finding. But the fetters of even moderate Success makes one feel like they have to play defense, or manage instead of conquer. This runs counter to my DNA, which leads to unhappiness. Therefore, I need to divest myself of assets that require protecting, or I need to better delegate this responsibility. That all sounds pleasantly analytical. Aren't we smart? But perhaps the real value is that 2. I'm just caging my monkey mind on paper so I can get on with my fucking day. If you take nothing from this chapter but number 2 above and the next few lines, I'll consider my mission accomplished. Morning pages don't need to solve your problems. They simply need to get them out of your head, where they'll otherwise bounce around all day like a bullet ricocheting inside your skull. Could bitching and moaning on paper for 5 minutes each morning ge your life as crazy as it seems? I believe the answer is yes. Reid Hoffman. Reid Hoffman, Lee/TW. At Reid Hoffman. ReidHoffman.org, is often referred to as the Oracle of Silicon Valley by tech insiders who look at his company building and investing track record, Facebook, Airbnb, Flickr, etc. with awe. Reid is co-founder and executive chairman of LinkedIn, which has more than 300 million users and was sold to Microsoft for $26.2 billion in cash. He was previously executive vice president at PayPal, which was purchased by eBay for $1.5 billion. He has a master's degree in philosophy from Oxford, where he was a Marshall Scholar. Behind the scenes, Reid, along with Matt Mullenweg, page 202, is one of the calmest people I've ever met. His former chief of staff has told stories of Reid responding to an insult with "I'm perfectly willing to accept that," and moving on. Reid was nicknamed firefighter-in-chief at PayPal by then CEO Peter Thiel. Reid and I are both on the advisory board of QuestBridge, where he is the chair. QuestBridge supplies more exceptional low-income talent, i.e., kids, to top universities than all other nonprofits combined. QuestBridge has created a single standardized college application that's accepted by more than 30 top universities like Stanford, MIT, Amherst, and Yale. This allows them to do some very innovative things, such as give away laptops and have the giveaway forms double as college applications. They then offer scholarships to many kids who could otherwise not even think of college. Did you know that roughly $3 billion available for scholarships goes wasted each year? It's not a funding problem, it's a sourcing problem. What Billy Beane of the Oakland A's and Moneyball fame was to baseball, QuestBridge is to college education. How Reid developed the ability to deconstruct problems and interact with many stakeholders at once: credit card processors, banks, regulators, etc. I think the most fundamental was, as a child, I played a lot of Avalon Hill board games, and each board game is actually a complex set of rules and circumstances. Reid also read Karl von Clausewitz and Sun Tzu as a boy, which informed his strategic thinking. For the philosophy phobic, 1. Philosopher to start with. Reid recommends studying Ludwig Wittgenstein, about whom he's taught a course at Oxford. One of the bedrocks of modern analytic philosophy is to think of language. If you're trying to talk to someone else about some problem, and you're trying to make progress, how do you make language as positive an instrument as possible? What are the ways that language can work, and what are the ways that language doesn't work? TF, one of my all-time favorite quotes from Dear Ludwig is, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world. Die Grenzen meiner Sprache bedeuten. Die Grenzen meiner Welt." It doesn't always have to be hard. I have come to learn that part of the business strategy is to solve the simplest, easiest, and most valuable problem. And actually, in fact, part of doing strategy is to solve the easiest problem. So part of the reason why you work on software and bits is that Atom's physical products are actually very difficult TF, the bolded lines are key elements that I'm prone to under-examining. In doing an 80/20 analysis of your activities, simply put, determining which 20% of activities/tasks produce 80% of the results you want, you typically end up with a short list. Make easy your next criterion. Which of these highest value activities is the easiest for me to do? You can build an entire career on 80/20 analysis and asking this question. Give the mind an overnight task on a daily basis. Reed jots down problems in a notebook that he wants his mind to work on overnight. Bolding below is mine, as I think the wording is important. Note might have instead of have, etc. What are the kinds of key things that might be constraints on a solution, or might be the attributes of a solution? And what are tools or assets I might have? I actually think most of our thinking, of course, is subconscious. Part of what I'm trying to do is allow the fact that we have this kind of relaxation, rejuvenation period in sleeping, to essentially possibly bubble up the thoughts and solutions to it. He might write down a key thing that I want to think about, a product design, a strategy, a solution to a problem that one of my portfolio companies is looking at, or something else he wants to solve creatively before an upcoming meeting. Josh Waitzkin, page 577, has a near identical habit, but he's particular about when he writes things down right after dinner and not before bed. To Josh, the pre-sleep gestation period of a few hours is important, as he doesn't want to be consciously thinking about the problem when he gets under the sheets. Josh and Reed also mirror each other. Upon waking, ideally, Reed budgets 60 minutes for the following. The very first thing I do when I get up, almost always, is to sit down and work on that problem I've set the day before. Because that's when I'm freshest. I'm not distracted by phone calls and responses to things, and so forth. It's the most tabula rasa blank slate moment that I have. I use that to maximize my creativity on a particular project. I'll usually do it before I shower, because frequently, if I go into the shower, I'll continue to think about it. TF, Reed and Josh's descriptions led me to put the following quote at the top of my notebook: never go to sleep without a request to your subconscious. Thomas Edison. Additional lessons from Ben Kasnica. F.B. Kasnica, Reed's former chief of staff. Reed's first principle is speed. We agreed I was going to make judgment calls on a range of issues on his behalf without checking with him. He told me, in order to move fast, I expect you'll make some foot faults. I'm okay with an error rate of 10 to 20% times when I would have made a different decision in a given situation if it means you can move fast. I felt empowered to make decisions with this ratio in mind, and it was incredibly liberating. TF, foot faults is a metaphor here. Foot fault literally refers to a penalty in tennis when you serve with improper foot placement, often due to rushing on vetting the best employees or partners. How do you know if you have A players on your project team? You know it if they don't just accept the strategy you hand them. They should suggest modifications to the plan based on their closeness to the details. Reed seeks a single reason for a potentially expensive action, not a blended reason. For example, we were once discussing whether it makes sense for him to travel to China. There was the LinkedIn expansion activity in China, some fun intellectual events happening, the launch of the startup of Reed's book in Chinese. There were a variety of possible good reasons to go, but none justified a trip in and of itself. He said, there needs to be one decisive reason, and then the worthiness of the trip needs to be measured against that one reason. If I go, then we can backfill into the schedule all the other secondary activities. But if I go for a blended reason, I'll almost surely come back and feel like it was a waste of time. Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel, TW at Peter Thiel. With one tweet and 130k plus followers. FoundersFund.com is a serial company founder, PayPal, Palantir, billionaire investor, the first outside investor in Facebook. and more than 100 others. An author of the book 0 to 1. His teachings on differentiation, value creation, and competition alone have helped me make some of the best investment decisions of my life, such as Uber, Alibaba, and more. Backstory. Peter is known as a master debater. When he appeared on my podcast, he answered questions submitted by my fans, which were upvoted on Facebook. Notice how often he reframes the question, examines whether the question is the right question before answering. In several cases, how he dissects wording is as interesting as his answers. The tools in this profile are Peter's thinking, and his macro-level beliefs that guide thousands of smaller decisions. His answers are worth reading a few times each, asking yourself afterward, if I believe this, how would it affect my decisions in the next week? Over the next 6 to 12 months? What do you wish you had known about business 20 years ago? If you go back 20 or 25 years, I wish I would have known that there was no need to wait. I went to college. I went to law school. I worked in law and banking, though not for terribly long. But not until I started PayPal did I fully realize that you don't have to wait to start something. So if you're planning to do something with your life, if you have a 10-year plan of how to get there, you should ask, why can't you do this in 6 months? Sometimes, you have to actually go through the complex 10-year trajectory. But it's at least worth asking whether that's the story you're telling yourself, or whether that's the reality. How important is failure in business? I think failure is massively overrated. Most businesses fail for more than one reason. So when a business fails, you often don't learn anything at all because the failure was overdetermined. TF. Overdetermined, to determine, account for, or cause something in M. Or than one way or with more conditions than are necessary. You will think it failed for reason 1, but it failed for reasons 1 through 5. And so, the next business you start will fail for reason 2, and then for 3 and so on. I think people actually do not learn very much from failure. I think it ends up being quite damaging and demoralizing to people in the long run, and my sense is that the death of every business is a tragedy. It's not some sort of beautiful aesthetic where there's a lot of carnage. But that's how progress happens, and it's not some sort of educational imperative. So I think failure is neither a Darwinian nor an educational imperative. Failure is always simply a tragedy. What are the biggest tech trends that you see defining the future? I don't like talking in terms of tech trends because I think, once you have a trend, you have many people doing it. And once you have many people doing something, you have lots of competition and little differentiation. You, generally, never want to be part of a popular trend. You do not want to be the 4th online pet food company in the late 1990s. You do not want to be the 12th thin panel solar company in the last decade. And you don't want to be the nth company of any particular trend. So I think trends are often things to avoid. What I prefer over trends is a sense of mission. That you are working on a unique problem that people are not solving elsewhere. When Elon Musk started SpaceX, they set out the mission to go to Mars. You may agree or disagree with that as a mission statement, but it was a problem that was not going to be solved outside of SpaceX. All of the people working there knew that, and it motivated them tremendously. TF, Peter has written elsewhere, the next Bill Gates will not build an operating system. The next Larry Page or Sergey Brin won't make a search engine. And the next Mark Zuckerberg won't create a social network. If you are copying these guys, you aren't learning from them. How would you reply to someone who says that your position on college and higher education is hypocritical since you, yourself, went to Stanford for both undergraduate and law school? Context: many people see Peter as anti-college due to his Teal Fellowship, which gives $100,000 to young people who want to build new things instead of sitting in a classroom. I think some people will always find objections of one sort or another. Had I Not gone to Stanford or law school. People would object and say I had no idea what I was missing. So I think they're likely to complain in any event. But I would say my view is not hypocritical because I have never made the claim that there's a one-size-fits-all. So if I said that nobody should go to college, that might be hypocritical. But what I have said is that not everybody should do the same thing. There is something very odd about a society where the most talented people all get tracked to are the same elite colleges, where they end up studying the same small number of subjects and going into the same small number of careers. That strikes me as sort of a lack of diversity in our thinking about the kinds of things people should be doing. It's very limiting for our society as well as for those students. I certainly think I was very much guilty of this myself, if I look back on my Stanford undergraduate and law school years. It's possible I would do it again. But if I had to do something over, I would think about it much harder. I would ask questions. Why am I doing this? Am I doing this just because I have good grades and test scores and because I think it's prestigious? Or am I doing this because I'm extremely passionate about practicing law? I think there are good answers, and there are bad answers. And my retrospective on my early 20s is that I was way too focused on the wrong answers at the time. What do you think the future of education looks like? TF, I include this mostly for the very first line and his reframe. I don't like the word education because it is such an extraordinary abstraction. I'm very much in favor of learning. I'm much more skeptical of credentialing or the abstraction called education. So there are all of these granular questions like, what is it that we're learning? Why are you learning it? Are you going to college because it's a 4-year party? Is it a consumption decision? Is it an investment and decision? Where you're investing in your future? Is it insurance? Or is it a tournament where you're just beating other people? And are elite universities really like Studio 54 where it's like an exclusive nightclub? I think if we move beyond the education bubble that we're living in today, the future will be one in which people can speak about these things more clearly. Listen to his entire riff on this in episode number 28 at 17:24. What one thing would you most like to change about yourself or improve on? It's always hard to answer this, since it sort of begs the question of why I haven't already improved on it. But I would say that when I look back on my younger self, I was insanely tracked, insanely competitive. And when you're very competitive, you get good at the thing you're competing with people on. But it comes at the expense of losing out on many other things. If you're a competitive chess player, you might get very good at chess but neglect to develop other things because you're focused on beating your competitors, rather than on doing something that's important or valuable. So I've become, I think, much more self-aware over the years about the problematic nature of a lot of the competition. There have been rivalries that we get caught up in. And I would not pretend to have extricated myself from this altogether. So I think, every day, it's something to reflect on and think about how do I become less competitive in order and I can become more successful. You studied philosophy as an undergraduate. What does philosophy have to do with business? And how has your study of philosophy helped you in your investing and career today? I'm not sure how much the formal study of philosophy matters, but I think the fundamental philosophical question is one that's important for all of us, and it's always this question of what do people agree merely by convention, and what is the truth? There's a consensus of things that people believe to be true. Maybe the conventions are right, and maybe they're not. And we never want to let a convention be a shortcut for truth. We always need to ask, is this true? And this is always what I get at with this indirect question, tell me something that's true that very few people agree with you on. TF, Peter will also sometimes ask potential hires, what problem do you face every day that nobody has solved yet, or what is a great company no one has started? I will sometimes pose a bastardized version of his something few people agree with you on question. To podcast guests, what do you believe that other people think is insane. 3 of 7 questions. There are 7 questions that Peter recommends all startup founders ask themselves. Grab 0 to 1 for all of them, but here are the 3 I revisit often. The monopoly question, are you starting with a big share of a small market? The secret question, have you identified a unique opportunity that others don't see? The distribution question, do you have a way to not just create but deliver your product? It's always the hard part that creates value. You are more powerful than you think you are. Act accordingly. Spirit. Animal. Loon. Seth Godin. Seth Godin, TW. At the Sysits blog. SethGodin.com, is the author of 18 best-selling books that have been translated into more than 35 languages. He writes about the way ideas spread, marketing, strategic quitting, leadership, and challenging the status quo in all areas. His books include Linchpin, Tribes, The Dip, Purple Cow, and What to Do When It's Your Turn. And it's Eyes Your Turn. Seth has founded several companies, including Yoyodyne and Squidoo. His blog, which you can find by typing Seth into Google, is one of the most popular in the world. In 2013, Godin was inducted into the Direct Marketing Hall of Fame. Recently, Godin turned the book publishing world on its ear by launching a series of 4 books via Kickstarter. The campaign reached its goal in just 3 hours and became the most successful book project in Kickstarter history. Trust and attention. These are the scarce items in a post-scarcity world. We can't out-obedience the competition. TF, I like this so much that I wanted to mention it twice. More context next time. Be a meaningful specific instead of a wandering generality. On saying no and declining things. The phone rings, and lots of people want a thing. If it doesn't align with the thing that is your mission, and you say yes, now your mission is their mission. There's nothing wrong with being a wandering generality instead of a meaningful specific, but don't expect to make the change you hope to make if that's what you do. Money is a story. And it's better to tell a story about money you're happy with. Once you have enough for beans and rice and taking care of your family and a few other things, money is a story. You can tell yourself any story you want about money, and it's better to tell yourself a story about money that you can happily live with. If you generate enough bad ideas, a few good ones tend to show up. People who have trouble coming up with good ideas, if they're telling you the truth, will tell you they don't have very many bad ideas. But people who have plenty of good ideas, if they're telling you the truth, will say they have even more bad ideas. So the goal isn't to get good ideas, the goal is to get bad ideas. Because once you get enough bad ideas, then some good ones have to show up. See James Altucher on page 246. What you track determines your lens. Choose carefully. Those of us who are lucky enough to live in a world where we have enough, and we have a roof and we have food, we find ourselves caught in the cycle of keeping track of the wrong things. Keeping track of how many times we've been rejected. Keeping track of how many times it didn't work. Keeping track of all the times someone has broken our heart or double-crossed us or let us down. Of course, we can keep track of those things, but why? Why keep track of them? Are they making us better? Wouldn't it make more sense to keep track of the other stuff? To keep track of all the times it worked? All the times we took a risk? All the times we were able to brighten someone else's day? When we start doing that, we can redefine ourselves as people who are able to make an impact on the world. It took me a bunch of cycles to figure out that the narrative was up to me. If a narrative isn't working, well, then, really, why are you using it? The narrative isn't done to you, the narrative is something that you choose. Once we can dig deep and find a different narrative, then we ought to be able to change the game. Stories let us lie to Ourselves and those lies satisfy our desires. TF, the stories we tell ourselves can sometimes be self-defeating. One of the refrains that I've adopted for myself, which I wrote in my journal after some deep plant medicine work, see James Fadiman, page 100, for more on that, is, don't retreat int. Oh story. Try sitting at a different table. If you think hard about one's life, most people spend most of their time on defense, in reactive mode, in playing with the cards they got instead of moving to a different table with different cards. Instead of seeking to change other people, they are willing to be changed. Part of the arc of what I'm trying to teach is, everyone who can hear this has more power than they think they do. The question is, what are you going to do with that power? Can you push something downhill? If you think about how hard it is to push a business uphill, particularly when you're just getting started, one answer is to say, why don't you just start a different business, a business you can push downhill? My friend Lynn Gordon is a brilliant thinker and designer, and for years, she was in the business of designing toys and soft goods for moms with toddlers. Every toy company in America was mean to her, rejected her, had nothing to do with her. I said, Lynn, it's simple. Toy companies don't like toy designers. They're not organized to do business with toy designers. They're not hoping toy designers will come to them. I said, come with me into the book business. Because every day, there are underpaid, really smart people in the book business who wake up waiting for the next idea to come across their desk. They're eager to buy what you have to sell. And within 2 months, she did the 52 registered activity decks and ultimately sold more than 5 million decks of cards. First, 10 people. Seth has published roughly 6,500 posts on his blog since 2002. Which blog post would he point people to first, if he had to pick one? The blog post I point people to the most is called First 10, and it is a simple theory of marketing that says, tell 10 people, show 10 people, share it with 10 people who already trust you and already like you. If they don't tell anybody else, it's not that good. And you should start over. If they do tell other people, you're on your way to create something great, or eventually huge. Start extremely small. My suggestion is, whenever possible, ask yourself, what's the smallest possible footprint I can get away with? What is the smallest possible project that is worth my time? What is the smallest group of people who I could make a difference for, or to? Because smallest is achievable. Smallest feels risky. Because if you pick smallest and you fail, now you've really screwed up. We want to pick big. Infinity is our friend. Infinity is safe. Infinity gives us a place to hide. So, I want to encourage people instead to look for the small. To be on one medium in a place where people can find you. To have one sort of interaction with one tribe, with one group where you don't have a lot of lifeboats. See 1,000 true fans on page 289. No one gets a Suzuki tattoo. You can decide that you want to be tattoo worthy. Said H on Suzuki versus Harley Davidson. The latter of which has deliberately created an aspirational brand. I quantify almost nothing in my life. I sometimes fear I'll lose my edge if I stop measuring everything. This line was freeing for me to hear, as Seth has been an idol of sorts for years. He inspired me to start cycling off of quantification, much like I cycle off of supplements for at least 1 week every 2 months. Example, I took July 2016 off of tracking weight/body fat, social media, website, and newsletter stats. I like to study what Seth doesn't do as much as what he does. Seth has no comments on his blog, he doesn't pay attention to analytics, and he doesn't use Twitter or Facebook, except to rebroadcast his daily blog posts, which is automated. In a world of tool obsession and FOMO, fear of missing out on the next social platform, Seth doesn't appear to care. He simply focuses on putting out good and short daily posts. He ignores the rest, And he continues to thrive. There are no real rules, so make rules that work for you. Quick takes. Breakfast. Breakfast is one more decision I don't make, so it's a frozen banana, hemp powder, almond milk, a dried plum, and some walnuts in the blender. Cooking lessons. My wife got me a Chris Schlesinger cooking class, and it was the only cooking class I'd ever taken. In 20 minutes, I learned more about cooking than I think I'd learned before or since. Because Chris basically taught me how to think about what you were trying to do. And basically said, A, you should taste the food as you go, which a surprisingly small number of people do, and B, salt and olive oil actually are cheating and their secret weapons and they always work. Audio gone. Seth is an audiophile. He particularly enjoys focusing on analog and, in many ways, anachronistic equipment still made by hand. AudioGone is a website where you can find people who buy things new and sell them 6 months later in perfect condition. Parenting advice. What could possibly be more important than your kid? Please don't play the busy card. If you spend 2 hours a day without an electronic device, looking your kid in the eye, talking to them and solving interesting problems, you will raise a different kid than someone who doesn't do that. That's one of the reasons why I cook dinner every night. Because what a wonderful, semi-distracted environment in which the kid can tell you the truth. For you to have low stakes but super important conversations with someone who's important to you. On education and teaching kids. Sooner or later, parents have to take responsibility for putting their kids into a system that is indebting them and teaching them to be cogs in an economy that doesn't want cogs anymore. Parents get to decide. And from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m., those kids are getting homeschooled. And they're either getting homeschooled and watching the Flintstones, or they're getting homeschooled and learning something useful. I think we need to teach kids 2 things: 1, how to lead, and 2, how to solve interesting problems. Because the fact is, there are plenty of countries on Earth where there are people who are willing to be obedient and work harder for less money than us. So we cannot out-obedience the competition. Therefore, we have to outlead or outsolve the other people. The way you teach your kids to solve interesting problems is to give them interesting problems to solve. And then, don't criticize them when they fail. Because kids aren't stupid. If they get in trouble every time they try to solve an interesting problem, they'll just go back to getting an A by memorizing what's in the textbook. I spend an enormous amount of time with kids. I think that it's a privilege to be able to look a trusting, energetic, smart 11-year-old in the eye and tell him the truth. And what we can say to that 11-year-old is, I really don't care how you did on your vocabulary test. I care about whether you have something to say. What's something you believe that other people think is crazy? Deep down, I am certain that people are plastic in the positive sense. Flexible and able to grow. I think almost everything is made, not born. And that makes people uncomfortable. Because it puts them on the hook, but I truly believe it. Seth's favorite audiobooks, which he listens to repeatedly. TF, first I'll provide the list, then his recommended uses. Goals, setting and achieving them. On schedule, how to stay motivated, and secrets of closing the sale by Zig Ziglar. Zig is your grandfather and my grandfather. He's Tony Robbins's grandfather. None of us would be here if it weren't for Zig. Works of Pema Chodron, almost the flip side. I'm so much better at protracted difficult periods. Because of Pema and because of meditation and because of knowing how to sit with it and not insist that the tension go away. Leap First, inspired by Zig and Pema, and some work I did. This book for charity, it's a short audiobook and you can get it at Sounds True. The Art of Possibility by Rosamund Stone Zander and Benjamin Zander, which is very hard to find on audio and is totally worth seeking out. The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, also hard to find on audio. I find Steve's voice to be fascinating, and even before I knew him, I was fascinated by listening to him speak his own Work. The War of Art is one of those books, at least for me. When I finally was exposed to it, I said, why wasn't I informed? Why did it take this long for this book to land on my desk? You need to be clear with yourself about what you are afraid of, why you are afraid, and whether you care enough to dance with that fear. Because it will never go away. Just Kids by Patti Smith. This is the single best audiobook ever recorded by Patti Smith. It is not going to change the way you do business, but it might change the way you live. It's about love and loss and art. Debt by David Graeber. I recommend it in audio because David is sometimes repetitive and a little elliptical, but in audio it's all okay because you can just listen to it again. Tim, which of these, going from Zig to Pema and onward down to debt with David, which of these do you think I should start with, or which one would you suggest I start with? Seth, for me, if you are feeling stuck, it's all about the war of art and the art of possibility. If you are feeling stressed, it's about Pema. If you need to see a path that is more colored than the one you're already on, which is pretty technicolor, then it's Zig. And if you just want to cry a little, it's Just Kids. And then debt is the one that is closest to reading a book. I don't think many people should listen to Debt 10 times. Seth's best purchase of $100 or less. You could become obsessed with artisanal bean-to-bar chocolate. Not that one should, but one could. So I did. And I worked my way up the ladder. About a year ago, I was going to start my own chocolate company because it's not that hard. Then I bumped into a few brands that were doing it better than I ever could. There are 2 chocolate companies I want to highlight, Rogue from Western Massachusetts and Eskinozy. And I'm actually an advisor to a new acumen company called Cacao Hunters in Colombia. What advice would you give your 30-year-old self? I had so many bumps starting when I was 30 years old. They lasted for 9 years, and I wouldn't tell my 30-year-old self anything. Because if I hadn't had those bumps, I wouldn't be me. And I'm glad I'm me. Pet obsessions. Coffee and vodka. Seth doesn't drink coffee or alcohol. Nonetheless, he enjoys making elaborate espresso and vodka for his family and guests. Odd side obsessions are a common trait of nearly everyone in this book, and I find Seth's description hilarious. His vodka recipe is also simply delicious. The coffee thing, we'll start there. I don't drink coffee. I wish I did. I need a vice. But I like making it. I like. Without being one of those people who is measuring everything, because that's not my shtick to have an intuitive sense of what makes a good pull of espresso. I used to have a fancy Slayer machine, which is the super digital hunk of a device that did not belong in anyone's kitchen, particularly mine. So when it started acting up, I was able to sell it for a fair price and switched, in the completely opposite direction, to a Swiss-made, 17-year-old, totally manual machine. You've got to pull a handle. And I roast my own beans, which is key. Marco Arment, co-founder of Tumblr, creator of Instapopper and Overcast, taught me that roasting your own beans is more important than any other thing you can do, if you want to make coffee. I think there's a metaphor there. I know there's a metaphor there. Which is, you can spend a lot of time trying to fix stuff later, but starting with the right raw materials makes a huge difference. Tim, then, vodka. Seth, there's a place near my house called Blue Hill at Stone Barns Center, which used to be the Rockefeller's summer house. It's a nice restaurant. At the bar I don't drink either, but I'm told that at the bar they serve honey oatmeal vodka. I reverse engineered the recipe, and it's not a still. But I make it in my basement. The recipe, for those who are interested, is you take a bottle of vodka. You don't want the super cheap stuff, but you don't want the expensive stuff because that's a little bit of a rip-off. You pour it over a pound of just plain old oatmeal, uncooked, and half a jar of honey. You let it sit in the fridge for 2 weeks, stirring it now and then. Then you strain it back into the original bottle and you're done. Final words of advice? Send someone a thank you note. tomorrow. We all have, let's say, 2 or 3 dozen massive pain points in our lives that everyone can relate to. I try to basically write about those, and then I try to write about how I attempted to recover from them.